Now I will pass now the floor to the last session of the conference. We have session 4, which is about embedding sustainability in infrastructure projects. And the moderator for this session is Anthony Marshall. He's an advisor to MPY and also an advisor to the IRF Board of Directors. So Tony, thanks for being with us today. And yeah, I give you now the floor. Thanks.
Thank you, Gonzalo. It's a very good session. And so the last session of the two-day conference, so, last but certainly not least, as we have a great mix of speakers from around the world. The session title is Embracing the New Trends in Road Transport, reflects the aim of continuing to look to the future. I have to say, after listening to the earlier sessions today and yesterday, we've already had some great forward-thinking presentations. So we'll be adding to those in this final session. Our speakers for the session will continue the global theme from their locations around the world. And you can see on the screen the core speakers for today. I think we may be missing one there. We're coming across to the others. Yeah, okay. So for the speakers today, first of all, we've got Angelo Amditis. Angelo is the president of ERTICO in Europe and research director with ICCS, the Institute of Communications and Computer Systems at the National Technical University in Athens. Our second speaker was due to be Seong-ik from the Ministry of Land and Infrastructure and Transport in Korea. Slight technical issue here with his presentation. Because of the time zones, we had a recorded presentation and we'll include that one in the pack, but we won't actually run that presentation today. So our second presentation will now be from Ireland with Geraldine Walsh, who's the head of road user charging at Transport Infrastructure Ireland, together with Traynor from ARUP. The following speaker will then be from Spain, Martí Jofre, who's the managing partner of FACTUAL, an innovation consultancy specializing in mobility, and he's based in Barcelona. Followed by, from the UK and the University of Birmingham, Dr. Gurmel, Ghataora, and Abeba Demessie. And then finally, from Ethiopia, I've got Iman Abubaker, the Urban Mobility Project Coordinator with the World Resource Institute in Ethiopia. So as well as that geographic mix of speakers from around the world, you can see there's a good spread there of academia, government agencies, private sector consultancies, and NGOs. So I think that just demonstrates the strength and the diversity of IRF that we've seen over the last couple of days. Each of our speakers will present for around 10 minutes, and hope we'll have a little time for questions at the end, but we may be getting a little tight. We'll see how we go. So with that, I'd like to hand first speaker and hand over the floor to Angelo.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Nice to be here with you. Again, very interesting conference, of course, until now. I'll try to share my screen. Okay, I hope you can see my slides. So,
if you can go to full screen, Angelo, that would be good.
Thank you very much. I'm also closing my camera to make it easier. I'm here with my capacity as president of ERTICO, and I'm going to discuss a little bit about a few concepts of mobility concepts, new mobility concepts that are coming. My main business is ICCS, Institute of Communication and Computer Systems here in Greece, where I'm a research director, and I'm also the vice president of the public transport in Athens, including buses, metros, tram, and everything. So all of them, I think, are a nice mix of things to do. So I'm going to tell you a few things about ERTICO very fast. Then I'm going to discuss some of the key points around smart mobility as a main pillar for, I'm calling them smart societies, not just smart cities. And then I will introduce to you a concept that we have introduced in ERTICO for the last 5 years, the Internet of Mobility, which we try to, through that, to discuss the holistic view on mobility. And I will close with some thoughts for the future, what's coming there, what is the next things that we're going to see. So ERTICO, for those that you're not aware of, or ITS Europe, is an association, organization, non-profit. It was maybe the first public-private partnership in Europe around smart mobility, at that time ITS, Intelligent Transportation Systems. And the power of ERTICO is that it brings together 8 different mobility sectors, or almost all stakeholders in the area which are related with mobility. The vision of ERTICO is making mobility smart, sustainable, and safe. And here in this picture, you can see the different sectors. This is from public authorities up to the core of the industry, which are related with mobility in general. And of course, research has a prominent role also in there. So, and a few things about ERTICO's mobility vision, which is not far away from everything that we are discussing also on this conference and everything that is discussed all around the globe. You will see on the right side the partnership of ERTICO, which is more than 120 partners now with all the key players inside. And the whole idea is that we're talking about a smart, safer, efficient, and sustainable mobility for the near future. And some keywords or some key concepts that are included there is green mobility, of course, and it's not just electric, but also hydrogen and any other sustainable ways of moving. Then a key concept for us is integration. We see transportation as a system, so in a holistic approach. And then we are looking on key concepts like on-demand mobility and transportation, shared mobility, and of course, as it is known to everyone, we are also moving very fast now to a more user-centric approach for mobility. And inside this ecosystem, all this discussion about connectivity, automation, digitalization, and multimodality are key concepts for what we do in ERTICO. I mentioned a little bit before about smart mobility being a pillar for smart societies. Usually, most of us were using mainly the word smart city, but for me, this is a pillar of a smart society. Smart society is something bigger. It involves everything that we do, all our actions, life and economy. And in a way, what we define as a smart society is the fact that a society can be smart by successfully harness the potential of all digital technologies, of all the things that we know, these disruptive technologies and all these connected devices. And it's using digitalization and all these industry 4.0 technologies and new concepts in order to improve people's lives. And inside there, a key element, of course, is the smart city, where smart mobility plays a major role. It's a pillar for creating, at the end of the day, a smart city and a smart society. Obviously, this is not the only issue. In the picture here, you can see all the different elements that really, at the end of the day, create what we call today a smart city. What is quite important here is the importance of data. You will see a horizontal bar at the low part of the slide, where we put data. And why? Because data has a major role to play in order to create everything that is with the word smart in front of it. And data is an element which is still under discussion. Issues around open data, about management of data, about availability of data and usage of data. Not to forget cybersecurity and other similar aspects of key importance and still in the main discussion for everywhere. So data is a key element which I would like you to keep from this slide also. So in ERTICO, we are today looking on 4 major areas of smart mobility. And one part of it, it's of course something that everybody is looking now, which is all these things around CCAM, connected, cooperative, connected, and automated driving. So we are looking on how we can really use practically and in real terms automation and connectivity in order to create a safer and smarter mobility ecosystem. And this is related also with the infrastructure. And by infrastructure, I mean not just the physical, but also the digital and the operational. I will come back to that a little bit later. Then it's all around clean mobility, how we can really reduce environmental impact. And special focus is given on all these concepts of sharing and looking on mobility and transportation as a service, so mass, urban mobility, all these issues around delivering seamless mobility to all citizens and for all reasons. And another major area, of course, is transport in the logistics sector. So the whole discussion about creating the digital infrastructure for freight transport and for all logistics operations, it is also of great importance here. Obviously, we need to understand that transport is a pillar of logistics and not logistics a pillar of transport, but still it's one of the main aspects and of great importance. So a little bit on one of the main concepts I mentioned before. For us, it's all about integration and a holistic approach. We are looking on transportation as a system, and we are trying to really put all the elements together in order to understand the whole ecosystem, the whole environment of that. In order to do that, we have created a new term 5 years ago, more or less 5 years ago, which is the Internet of Mobility. Why? Because Internet is a very easy term, a term that everybody knows, and a term that people can understand, and also gives this idea of connectivity, of integration, of networking, of bringing the different elements together. So we found that this is very easy to explain to people, to the citizens, to authorities, and to all the other stakeholders. So we consider this Internet of Mobility a type of integration of all transport modes, all the different concepts that we discussed also before and we are using today. And also, of course, very important, all these new disruptive technologies like artificial intelligence, IoT, 5G, and many others. And why we do this integration? Because we would like at the end of the day to create a holistic, integrated, a complete digitalized transport system that will be able to support both the movements of people, but also of goods. So we consider the Internet of Mobility as maybe the best way to explain how this mobility, smart mobility issue becomes a main pillar for smart society. So this gives you an idea about the complexity, about all the elements together. On the left side, you see this physical internet concept that logistics ecosystem has created, which is also part of it. You will see the importance of the traffic management centers and of the infrastructure. This is another way to put it. At the end of the day, we're looking for mobility as a service. We're looking for a complete ecosystem that will support the movement of people and goods. So what are the next steps that we see in order to enable all this smart and sustainable mobility? So I mentioned before, integration on all levels for us is a key element, and I'm speaking not just modes, not just infrastructure, but all these disruptive technologies, all the stakeholders. We see CCAM to play a major role more and more in our mobility system. I spoke about open data policies and interoperability issues, standardization. All these things are of great importance and will be one of the main things that we're going to look. Public and private synergies. Quite important is the social acceptance and trust in all these new concepts. And I think this is something that we really need to put a lot of effort. All this idea about user-centered, all-inclusive mobility by design, so putting user in the center, new concepts of mobility inside and outside the city, so the concept of smart societies, and a smooth integration of disruptive technologies to mobility schemes. So all in all, smart mobility is and will be a main pillar of smart societies. And I'm closing with this slide about mobility expectations by 2030. So what we see is that quite soon we will have new vehicles, automated vehicles, even of level 4, and we expect to see them on the road, so on mixed traffic scenario. It is a discussion if it's going to be on dedicated infrastructure or in open roads, and this is also where infrastructure people are playing a key role. We see eco-friendly mobility to take more and more a bigger market share, and I'm not speaking only about EVs here. Hydrogen is becoming more and more interesting, and a lot of discussions around that. New types of vehicles will be integrated into the system, like drones, new evolutions of scooters and micro-mobility and active mobility concepts. On-demand mobility services, both mobility and delivery as a service. And we're moving fast towards decreasing the logic of vehicle ownership, towards more buying mobility services and not vehicles. So from collective transport concepts to more user-centric concepts. Infrastructure will play an important role, more and more on that. And I'm speaking both about physical and digital, but also operational infrastructure. And they're going to be really a long transition period with mixed traffic scenarios. In policy level, we are looking on continuous changes and continuous updates of all green transport priorities, not only on European level, but also on nation level and globally, of course. And a lot of new things will come. I mean, we have seen the Green Deal of the European Commission, the Recovery Fund, and we expect more and more activities in this area, also from the policy point of view. So thank you very much. I hope it was interesting for you.
Thank you very much, Angelos. Very interesting presentation. I'm good to see the role of ERTICO in bringing forward the opportunity of the smart, sustainable solutions to deliver a wider set of outcomes, whether that's the technical side, the social, or the environmental outcomes, which I think is a very good lead into our second presentation today from Geraldine Walsh and Caroline Traynor, which is looking at the next generation of road user charging. In this particular context is Ireland, but I think we'll find there's some potential wider applicability beyond Ireland as well. So if I hand over to Geraldine and Caroline for the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony, and indeed thank you very much, Angelos. There's certainly very interesting and relevant concepts in there, you know, and something that I suppose within our presentation, with our future, I suppose, journey that we're on in TII, you know, the whole concept of smart cities and smart society is something that we're also considering. So in terms of, I suppose, this morning's presentation, what Caroline and I would like to do is, I suppose, take you through the journey that we're on in TII, having regard to the next generation of road user charging. So I suppose, what does this mean for TII? So I suppose if we just take a minute or two just to look at the context and the Irish motorway network. So TII is responsible for the delivery and maintenance and operation of the national road network. That comprises of over 5,500 kilometres of national road network, of which 1,100 kilometres is actually motorway network. But you can see here, as we've illustrated on the screen, that of that 1,100, that 374 kilometres of those are actually maintained by PPP contracts, by 13 PPP contracts, and 8 of which are tolled. Now, most of these sections are actually barrier toll systems, with one exception, which is the M50, which is the orbital route around Dublin, and that's actually a free flow tolling system. Now, as well as that, our primary method of collection and toll collection in Ireland is actually through tag. But one thing I suppose that we are seeing, particularly kind of during COVID, is less and less of reliance upon cash collection and more of a movement towards this electronic tag and indeed video and app collection of our tolls. In 2019 alone, we had over 130 million toll transactions. So our PPP network was predominantly built between the year 2000 and 2010, and at a value of 32 billion, we know that it represents, I suppose, a very strategic economic asset for the Irish government. But given the fact that, you know, some of them, you know, were built as far back as 2000, we are now looking towards, you know, what happens when these PPPs expire. And the first one of those PPP contracts is actually expiring in 2033. So what really does that then mean for TII? And it very much kind of leaves us with a number of options and decisions that we need to make. And that then really brings us on to Project Bruce, which is, I suppose, the project that we want to talk to you about this morning. So what is Project Bruce? And Project Bruce really is an acronym for Better Road User Charging Evaluation. And in short, really, Bruce is about TII considering how we're going to fund, operate and maintain these PPP networks in the future. And as I said previously, we have a number of decisions that we have to make. Do we simply take back these PPP networks without the collection of tolls, Or do we continue to operate and collect the tolls ourselves? Or do we look to kind of future road user charging models like that they have in the Netherlands, where by 2026 they're considering, you know, a distance-based charge of 15 cents per kilometre. You know, for 15 years, my predominant experience has been in managing the national road network. And so many times I think I've absolutely seen the trade-offs between trying to achieve a level of service that really is aligned with constrained budget levels and constrained operating expenditure budgets. And it has been a consistent challenge. So Bruce really for TII is about an opportunity to think about how we can evolve our national road network so that we have the appropriate funding, operating and maintenance networks and I suppose regimes in place. We know that the national road network, you know, certainly Angelos, you mentioned it yourself, a key element is, you know, for a smart society is about moving people and goods. We know that the national road network contributes to the overall kind of economic value of the network and to the economy. And indeed, it simply connects people to places. So how do we need to continue to evolve? And that really is the key question that is, I suppose, that we're focusing upon within Project Bruce. At the moment, within TII, we rely upon exchequer funding, and that split is probably 80% to 20%. So we've 20% of our own funding, obviously through our tolling income, and 80% comes from the exchequer. However, there's a lot that we know that's happening in that kind of macro environment, not least of which obviously is, I suppose, the financial impacts of COVID and I suppose the financial impacts that that's going to have upon future national development plans and future kind of motorway growth and future motorway investment. So is there a model that we can develop that will allow TII become that little bit more kind of financially resilient? Taking in mind as well, you know, Angelos, some of the concepts that you've been talking about, kind of smart mobility, digital technology, connected ITS, you know, how can we evolve our network so that we can embrace these technologies? And similarly with the likes of the European Green Deal, how can we ensure that our network will evolve so that we can reduce our carbon footprint? And all at the same time ensuring that we can build economic and public value. So you can see that we've a lot of challenges that we face within TII. But indeed, I think it's fair to say that every transport agency is facing these challenges. And we know, for example, that, you know, our predicted growth in vehicle kilometres based on a traffic model, you know, is exponential, and that unless we do something that to manage that demand nationally, that sections of our network by 2030 and 2040 are going to be operating over capacity. So Bruce really is about that strategic decision-making process so that the approach that we take and the options that we develop, in essence, will be fair and equitable to the Irish people, that regardless of where they live, that they're not discriminated against, either based on income or geographical kind of regions. So really, as I said, it's a long-term strategic decision-making approach. I suppose the question could be asked, you know, why now? Why are we doing this? I suppose kind of 10 years in advance. But really, evidence has shown us that long-term planning is required for PPP planning expiries. So what I'd like to do now is hand you over to Caroline, who'll bring us through the approach that we're taking for Project Bruce. Thank you, Caroline.
That's great. Thanks, Geraldine. So we're progressing the project through the Irish Public Spending Code to rigorously test the assumptions and relevance of the proposed solutions. And we've just completed a strategic assessment report, and we're starting into a preliminary business case, and that includes an options appraisal. And the critical questions that we need to measure are not just our typical financial and economical ones, although we will be answering those as well, but it's important that we understand, as Geraldine has outlined, perceived distributional equity, actual emissions, what mix of movement on the network best serves the economic interests of the country, what level of service is needed, And how do we invest in transport choices that incentivizes the reduction in car dependency, both improving personal well-being, but also enables the economy to grow without being choked with congestion? And one of the innovative tools we're using as part of this analysis is an agent-based model. And this allows us to answer questions over and above that of a traditional transport model, particularly around equity and distributional benefits, around emissions and how we might influence user behavior change on the network. And my colleague Mike spoke about the ABM as part of his presentation earlier today. So essentially, people's travel choices are individual, they're adaptive, and they're often complex, and they're not limited to a vehicle traveling from A to B. And the agent-based model is a way of representing and understanding that, and also understanding how changes and interventions on the network impact those travel choices. So that includes journeys, travel modes, and the resulting demand response and emissions changes, but also how those interventions and changes might impact different groups of people or businesses according to geographical location or wealth. And it's essential that we understand that in addition to a traditional transport response on the network, as for the reasons that Geraldine has outlined. We're also conscious that for success, the project needs to be politically and publicly acceptable. And we're doing strategic stakeholder management across government. We're measuring public sentiment as we move through the project stages. And we're collaborating with academic researchers to build multi-year narratives in line with government policy initiatives. And as part of the strategic assessment report, a list of options for the next generation of user charging on the Irish National Road Network was generated using a combination of different key characteristics, such as types of charging regimes, user types, and user exemptions, as well as the characteristics of how these regimes might be applied, such as system type and operational and maintenance models. And a strategic fit analysis was undertaken, resulting in the shortlisting of 5 options. So these options range from removing all tolling and charging on the network to maintaining and improving the existing point toll system in place today, up to a fully distance-based road user charging scheme across the entire road network. And the latter being the most aligned to EU and user pay policy and having the greatest potential for demand management and emissions reduction outcomes and the potential to influence road users' behavior and usage patterns. However, each option does have its own benefits and disbenefits, be that financial, economic, and environmental, or how it might align with policy and political and public acceptance. So our preliminary business case will more fully define and test these shortlisted options, or a combination of them. And they'll be tested rigorously for fairness, transport demand response, genuine carbon reduction benefits, while still solving the funding and economic issues. And sensitivity testing will also be applied to find the optimal solution. And as I said earlier, the analysis will be enhanced by collaborating with our stakeholders, harnessing academic insight and consumer research, and testing the options against international experience. So the preliminary business case will then give government the evidence needed to decide on the next stage of the project, or indeed to proceed with the project. And that may or may not include developing a pilot scheme to get real-world understanding of user behavior, systems efficiency, attractiveness, and cost to ensure that public engagement is grounded with understandable, measured, and transparent experience. So Project Boost aims to ensure that the future of our national road network is aligned with our emerging climate action, policy and transport plans for Ireland, to improve on the current charging arrangements and ensure that the next generation of road user charging for Ireland really optimises our national asset to maximise that public and economic benefit for Ireland. And that's all from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you, Geraldine and Caroline. It's a fascinating approach to the complex decision making, really, that trying to balance economics, demand management, carbon, and social outcomes. Identifying the right solution for that sort of complex range of outcomes. I think it'll be watched with great interest, both from national road network perspectives and from cities' perspectives around the world. And I think just thinking back to some of the earlier presentations today, I mean, there's a lot of parallels there with the sort of thing that Jamie Leather was talking about in the ADB and his results-based approach to programs of work in his region. So thank you for that. So moving on to our next speaker, Martí Jofre from FACTUAL, and Martí's talking about innovative solutions to plan and manage mobility. Thank you, Martí.
It seems that I cannot initiate my video.
It's because Caroline has stopped sharing her screen. Caroline, can you? Okay, you can try now, Martí. Otherwise, I will put your slides.
Okay. I can share my slides, but apparently not the video. The host stopped your video. Well, I will just present. Normally, now I can do it. Perfect. Thank you. So you should see also my slides now.
If you're able to go to full screen, Martí, that would be good.
Now we're in full screen, I guess. Hello?
Yeah, not yet for me, but it's okay if it won't. That's fine.
Okay. So thanks, Anthony IRF, for organizing this session. I will give you a quick oversight on the new projects we are running from FACTUAL. So let me first start with an introduction to FACTUAL. We're a consultancy company based in Barcelona. We deal with everything related to innovation in the mobility sector, either introduction of new technologies or new services in the sector. We do that by helping our partners and customers in different ways. So we not only, let's say, strategic innovation, we call it foresight, but also we get involved into research projects with the ambition to develop solutions. I will give you a few examples. We have a partnership with a software engineering company. So we aim at really developing new concepts and solutions, software solutions for the sector. And then finally, we also organize training. So now coming into the last projects we will present or we are working on. So first one is
Martí, apologies for interrupting you, but your slides are not moving. Maybe we should ask Agustina to put them up for you, because it might be due to connection. Agustina, if you have them handy, please put them on. Thank you.
Perfect, I'm sorry for that. So I mostly finished. This is the kind of projects or activities we undertake. So next slide. So yeah, I was mentioning this study we are running with the main stakeholders in the Barcelona and Catalonia region, from public sector, the metropolitan region of Barcelona, and other private stakeholders. We are helping them to define a public-private strategy to develop mobility as a service in the region. This is a long-term study which lasted for 2 years now, and we'll present it by the end of the month. It will be available for all of you in English version by then, so please keep tuned. Next slide. So then I will briefly introduce you satellite navigation services we are working on through 2 projects, Ariadne and Molière. They are funded by Horizon 2020 program from European Union, which aim at promoting the European satellite navigation system Galileo. One of them is on generic advice to public authorities and operators. So if you are interested, after this presentation, we are happy to help you to better understand how to leverage this technology. The other one is Molière, which is combining this technology with blockchain to offer a database of mobility data for mobility stakeholders. So next slide. So about Galileo, It's the European Satellite Navigation Service, which is free of charge for any user worldwide. It's not only providing coverage in Europe, everywhere, and it can be easily combined with GPS, GLONASS, Beidou system in China, so that they can be combined and offer better performance, especially in urban environment where buildings can block the signals. The more satellites you have, the better performance you'll get in terms of availability, accuracy, or time to first fix when you go out of a tunnel or a building. So next slide, please. So this should offer a better service on geolocation, which is key for many of the shared mobility services we are now experiencing in our cities. Actually, geolocation most of the times is the point of contact between users and the service, wherever they need to pick up or drop the vehicle. Next slide, please. So now moving into solutions. So they are products we are pushing to the market. One of them is NEMI. It's a demand responsive transport management platform. We are using that to support flexible services across Europe. Now we have 10 of them operational. This is supporting authorities to develop flexible services where the trip is built based on the request from the users. This allows a better, more efficient and more accessible service, especially in rural and peri-urban areas. You have the link here. If you are interested, you can check our product in detail. And then second is Ideal. In this case, it's an MVP. And so we are looking for partners to trial the concept. What we are doing is changing or shifting the way that financial incentives are provided to public and private mobility stakeholders. What we aim is at providing a calculation engine which can be plugged into any mobile application. And we are checking if that specific trip or booking that the user is aiming to do fills any of the criteria that would entitle this trip to get a micro subsidy. This can be criteria based on age, on time of the day, for example, at night for women, or it can be based on the mode of transport, if origin and destination, if it's a trip as a last mile connection or first mile connection to a public transport hub. So we can develop different criteria and we check for every trip if this is, it can be entitled to this subsidy. For both, we are looking for partners to develop it worldwide. Both are ready for pilots and operational services. And last slide. So maybe it has been presented before in the sessions, but just to remind that with IRF we are organizing a training on planning for autonomous mobility. It will start very soon. This is an online training with top experts worldwide. You can, from the presentation, you can click the link. Otherwise, in the IRF website, you'll have all the details. Last chairs are available for interested parties. So thank you.
Thank you, Martí, and keeping us nicely to time there. And it's, I think there's a good link there from demonstrating the importance of investment in research, in your case through the Horizon programme, through to our next presentation, which is from the University of Birmingham, and Dr. Ghataora and Abeba Demessie. And this is around the CRISP project, a climate resilient, sustainable road pavement surfacing research project. So if I hand over to, looks like handing over to Dr. Ghataora to start the presentation.
Just give me a minute. Things have gone a bit adrift here.
Would you like me to share the screen for you?
Okay, no, it's okay. It's just that I can't get the background if that's not a problem. Can we carry on?
Yes. Okay.
I'm okay. So let me just share the slides with you. Oops, excuse me. Okay, so excuse the background and start from the beginning. Okay, can you all see this? Hello?
Yes, we
Yeah,
can.
that's good.
Excellent, excellent, thank you. Okay, this project is about climate resilient sustainable roads, road pavement surfacings. My name is Dr. Ghataora, and I'm being joined by Abeba Demessie, who is an engineer with the Ethiopian Road Authority. She's also doing a PhD at the university. And I should just add that there are a couple of other people who are also involved with the project from Ethiopian Road Authority, and both are doing their research with us. Okay, so what are the aims of the project and why are we doing it? So let me explain that. Climate change is predicted to increase temperature. There are going to be more extreme rainfall events, and it's predicted that sea levels will rise. And if you just bear with me a second, okay, sea levels are going to rise, and that's going to impact many countries, particularly low-income countries, because of their income profiles. And it's predicted variously that by the middle of this century, 350 million people will be impacted by sea level rises, and by the end of the century, 650 million people will be affected. So it's a very significant effect. Okay, if we don't take account of the impact of climate change in our future road design and maintenance practices, there is going to be increased road deterioration, which will end up in high user cost. And I should just add that we were also looking at road agency costs, but the key thing was the road user cost. So we have been working on the CRISPS project for a while now. I say while, about 6 months. So what is the aim of this work? Well, it's to demonstrate the technical and economic suitability of 3 suitable best practice road surfacing technologies. And these are modified epoxy seal, modified epoxy asphalt surfacing, and fiber mastic asphalt. The epoxy modified materials give us long period between maintenance or resurfacing and maintenance compared to current technologies. And over a long term, they have been proved to be effective in other parts of the world. Fiber mastic asphalt uses oil palm fiber, and that has also been proven to be cost effective, certainly in Malaysia. And before I go on, I should just add that this project is funded through high volume transport, and it's a UK aid project. The consortium comprises of the University of Birmingham, who lead the project, University of Auckland, University of Putra, Malaysia, Ethiopian Road Authority, and International Road Federation. So the key areas covered are development of models for the behavior of 3 technologies which is identified. And we're looking at these under the current environment and traffic conditions found in high volume transport roads in low income countries in parts of Africa, and South Asia. So part of the exercise is to undertake a scoping exercise to identify existing chip seal practices in low income countries that are at risk of climate change, and which could benefit from the new technologies which have been abbreviated to MECS, MEAS, and FMA, essentially epoxy materials and fiber mastic asphalt. We will also develop life cycle models for these technologies, considering the effect of climate change, both in terms of construction of new roads and resurfacing. Part of the exercise is also to look at inexpensive methods of measuring in situ constituents of epoxy materials. You have to bear in mind that these materials are a little expensive. They become cost effective in the longer term, and our view is that once it's in place, it's almost too late. So we want to check what the composition is readily before the material is being put down. And so newer technologies newer methods of assessing these need to be investigated. So currently, people have been using FTIR, IR, and the neutron techniques, FNNA techniques for assessing the constituents of these epoxy materials. But we are looking at possibly cheaper methods of doing this. And finally, we will be undertaking a road construction trial in Ethiopia using these three technologies and monitoring them for a longer period, well beyond the end of this project. And ERA will do this, Ethiopian Road Authority will do this. And if we are successful in proving they're cost effective, they will then become part of their standard practice and will be developed into their procedures. Okay, this is where I pass on to Abeba Demessie. So over to you, Abeba.
Thank you, Dr. Gurmel, Ghataora. My name is Abeba. Hi, everybody. I will be presenting to you the modeling approach used to quantify climate change impact on pavement through the World Bank Highway Development Model, HDM4. It is an economic model designed to appraise investment in road network. The basis of the HDM4 approach is to compare over a defined period the costs and benefits in economic terms of investment in road infrastructure. There are different tools used to quantify the effect of climate change on pavement. However, HDM is selected due to its accessibility. It is the most widely used tool throughout the world, especially in developing countries. Different researchers used HDM4 successfully to demonstrate the contribution of the environment, and in particular prediction changes in climate on pavement deterioration. Next. It considers three cost components: road user cost, road agency cost, and economic cost. Road agency cost includes maintenance, building, and agency costs, while road user cost includes vehicle operation cost. Next, travel time cost for motorized and non-motorized traffic, accident cost, and environmental impact cost. The HDM4 also considers different surfacing and base materials, so it can be used for different pavement analysis. Next, please. Next, please.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. In order, the methodology used to analyze climate change impact quantification involves collecting input data as per the requirement of the HDM4 and calibration the HDM4 deterioration model for to fit the local condition. And in order to include the climate effect change, the model should be adjusted based on the climate considered, and life cycle cost analysis will be done after that. Please, next, please. Double surface treatment as a surfacing is used in moist climate zone, taken as a sample from Ethiopian Roads Authority road network to illustrate the methodology by considering deterioration model calibration and from 0.99 to 1.05 range climate adjustment factor for different periods. Time period for future climate change considered as a 10 years interval for a emission scenario. The annual average daily traffic ranges from 500 to 3,000, and the climate considered, the climate projection considered an increase in temperature and decrease in precipitation. Therefore, wet zones are selected. The graph shows the climate change impact for a minimum A2 emission scenarios. The analysis results shows that the change in average international roughness index as compared to the baseline condition for 3 road sections with different pavement initial condition and under routine and reactive maintenance. Road section 1 indicates that for first 2 decades, the climate change effect on predicted pavement performance in terms of IRI was less than as compared to the baseline under minimum maintenance application. And depending on the pavement condition, up to 39,000 pounds per kilometer additional road user cost was obtained due to climate change as compared to the baseline condition under routine maintenance. However, for road section 2, additional 7,300 pounds per kilometer road user cost was obtained under reactive maintenance application due to its initial pavement condition. It has higher IRI value. Next, please. This is similar to the previous one, but for a maximum A2 emission scenario. Next, please. The table indicates that no change was observed for AC due to the climate change. This implies that providing appropriate maintenance will handle the climate change effect in the future. And the road section 2 shows higher reactive maintenance cost because due to its condition, it requires road improvement work, not periodic maintenance. Therefore, effect of climate change can be predicted using HDM4 model for those new surfacings also. I thank you and leave the floor to Dr. Ghataora.
Thank you, Eva. Let me make some concluding remarks. Firstly, surfacings are an essential component of climate resilient road surfaces. We need to remember that these are perhaps the most impacted initially because they're exposed to the climate and the traffic. So we've also been able to show that HDM4 modeling for the Ethiopian condition shows an increase in road user costs due to future climate changes. Evidence from Malaysia, New Zealand, Europe, and other countries has shown the potential benefits of using epoxy surfacing materials and fibromastic asphalt. And these 3 technologies, although they have not been used in Africa, it suggests there is some potential for them. And just move this to one side. A potential for them in this area, particularly the research that's carried out in country in both terms of testing and undertaking construction, because there are some small differences in using epoxy materials and FMA, and we need to show that these can be undertaken using methodologies, technologies available in parts of Africa. The CRISP project is exploring the application of these technologies in terms of climate resilient, sustainable road pavement surfacing in Ethiopia. And so it's a case of watch this space as the project doesn't end until December 2022. And no doubt between now and the end of the project, we will be presenting more work on our findings. So finally, thank you for listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ghataora and Mrs. Demessie. Thank you. There may well be some questions on the presentation. If we should have some time for questions after the final presentation. So if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask about any of the presentations today, please add them to the the Q&A, and we'll pick them up at the end of or try and pick some of them up at the end of the session. Thank you. So keeping the Ethiopian theme, the next speaker is Iman Abubaker from the World Resource Institute in Ethiopia, talking about digital transport for Africa and unlocking the power of transport data. I could hand over to Iman.
Thank you very much. And good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to all. And thank you to IRF for inviting me to be part of this panel. Next slide, please. Before we get started, just a little bit about the World Resource Institute for some of you that might not be familiar. WRI is a global research organization that works at the nexus of environment and development and research and action. And our motto is to count it, change it, and scale it. And recently, we have established our African regional office in Addis Ababa in 2018 with a vision to really catalyze inclusive transformation so Africa's people and landscapes flourish. To do so, we have prioritized three main pillars: vital landscapes, thriving resilient cities, and institutional and economic transformation. We work across subnational, national, and regional scales, and our urban mobility work, which I'll be presenting on a little bit, is embedded within our cities program, and through our applicable research and on-the-ground activities, we really hope to contribute to shifting the trajectory of Africa's urban development through integrated approaches that work for all. Next slide, please. So when we ask ourselves, and this has been discussed quite a bit in terms of what is the problem, well, we know in African cities, urban growth has largely been unplanned, unregulated, and uncoordinated, and has resulted in the explosion of slums and urban sprawl that really has driven up the cost of living and exacerbated urban inequality. I really like this, how and one of the organizations that we work with, ITDP, coined what you see here in the pictures as organized chaos, because to many that are unfamiliar to the local context, this may seem like pure chaos, and you would wonder how cities are even operating and people are even getting around. And surprisingly, they do, and somehow in all this chaos, people have been resilient and made things work. However, that doesn't mean that the system works efficiently or that it works without a cost. The externalities are found in people's quality of life or in their ability to access basic services or affordability or even convenience. So people have to stand in line, as you can see, in long queues for hours. And yet in another part of town, you will see empty buses and minibuses operating on the streets. You'll hear of people who just want to go 3 to 4 kilometers. And because there aren't proper and safe walking and cycling facilities, they have no option but to stay in line. You see the congestion. You can almost imagine and feel the pollution that can come from this sort of organized chaos. And you can see that without the proper demarcation and use of road space, the risk of traffic fatalities and injuries are high because of how motorized vehicles and other modes are mixing. Next slide, please. What is making this worse is that governments and decision makers and planners are making decisions to improve transportation using manually based data and information. This is sort of a static paper map for one of the bus companies in Ethiopia that was developed a while ago. And the city is making, commendable progress in moving towards more flexible digital means of transport planning. But with the rapid urbanization and dynamism of cities, it's imperative that cities have the data, analysis, tools, and resources to design effective solutions. Next slide, please. And while the issues are many, there is a very strong opportunity and an urgency for why we should be tackling the issues around transportation in African cities. The first is that the continent is in a very historic phase of rapid city building, creating transport infrastructure, with 2/3 of the urban infrastructure still not built. And in terms of the urgency, we see that Africa is warming 2.6 times faster than the rest of than the global average, meaning that the longer that we take to solve this issue, it will only exacerbate our problems. And with road transport emissions being the main culprit for one of the main culprits for GHG emissions in African cities, the reason for improving transportation systems in Africa has never been much clearer. Next slide, please. So why are we focusing on transit data? There's no new solution to the problem. And the million-dollar question here is how? And the how is complex and different for each of the cities that we work in. But the common factor we have identified is data. Data has the potential to unlock many opportunities. First, having the data helps us understand the problem. Most of the public transport in Africa is informal and thus often ignored or sidelined. Yet they sometimes provide up to 70% of transportation services in many cities. And ignoring it is no longer possible. So without data, cities are making decisions in the dark. The solutions we recommend will not be sustainable, and we cannot properly analyze and plan. Secondly, once you have the data, there's so much you can do with it. In this digital age, the tools and technologies available really unlocks the opportunities for rapid and complex analysis across many sectors, thus getting to this integration. The third is that with only 18 of the African cities having mapped their public transport and having it available in an open data format, there's still a lot of work to do. We know that there's many more data sets out there, but if they're not open, they're not shared, then it's hard. And if they're not accessible, then the chances of it being utilized and the chances of it being outdated is very high. So we know that there are also a lot of cities that want to map their transit data, but don't have the resources or know how to do so. And our focus is really on transit data for now, but with the wider goal of leveraging transit data to move towards a more integrated, holistic approach to city planning and development. Next slide, please. So in 2017, as an initial response to this challenge, partners from the World Resource Institute, the French Development Agency, Columbia University, and MIT created the Digital Transport for Africa, which is a collaborative digital commons and global network that really works to scale up and support urban mobilities projects through open standardized data, open source software, and peer-to-peer knowledge sharing. It provides support for government, tech companies, and civil society actors to map their transit networks and foster ecosystems and skills that really enable cities to leverage data for critical transport improvements. So we're really supporting cities with counting and mapping their transit. We're working with a diverse set of stakeholders to leverage the data and develop and test solutions on the ground. And then when we're scaling our initiatives, we're using our DT4A consortium of partners and city governments to really inspire and mobilize others to do the same. Next slide, please. So with the new grant that we have with the French Development Agency, we have plans to, really go beyond mapping. So use that data to really bring up innovative tools and technology-based applications that could really support with improving transportation systems. We want to build the capacity in at least 10 cities, and we're hoping to organize trainings, workshops, and convenings where this peer-to-peer knowledge sharing platforms are available. And we really want to increase the use of the resource center. We have all the data sets there. We want people to submit the data that they have, and then we want to create tools that could make it easy to do accessibility analysis and different sort of research to inform transportation planning. Next slide, please. So really our goals, which I've gone through a little bit, is really to create a movement for open transit data across the region. We want to provide expertise and just simple tools. I know these things can be overwhelming. We've had conversations with government counterparts that have really, struggled with where do we start. These, as you saw in the pictures in the earlier slides, it can seem like a very hard thing to do, which is to take the first step. So we really help cities with developing their work plans to be able to start mapping their transit. If they have, how can they easily update it, and then go to other levels to really think about how they can come up with passenger information systems, how they can do accessibility analysis, and then implement solutions to improve access to basic services. The third is that we really want to gather evidence and present cases. We know there's a lot of work being done, but we want to be the hub where all this information is easily available. And finally, we want to cultivate innovations to go beyond mapping. And we know we can't do it alone, so we've been collaborating with city leaders, researchers and universities, innovators, and NGOs, civil society organizations. Next slide, please. So just a few examples of past activities. This is a workshop that we did in Kampala where city officials from Addis Ababa went to Kampala to present the mapping work that they did and how they started their journey, and also learn, about Kampala's mapping process and all the sort of challenges and opportunities that are there. So this really helps inspire cities. It helps peer-to-peer learning. It helps share experiences with cities that have similar contexts. And all this information is then available on the resource center, where anybody who wants to learn or create their data or share what they're doing, the platform is available. Next slide, please. This is an example of the technical support that we gave to the mapping of Addis Ababa's public transit system a while back. And you can see here, this was, we collected the data and then we overlaid it with the spatial data, and then identified some of the basic services like employment, hospitals, and we measured what the access would be. Now, the data still, it was only collected once, the transit data, so it's important to collect this multiple times to have more accuracy, but at least it gives an idea that at least in the center of the city, it's easy to access basic services. So what the yellow that you see, people can, access basic services between, 10 to 20 minutes. As you go to the peripheries and you see the darker oranges and the purple, it means that it's taking 45 minutes to an hour for a resident that lives in this area to access basic services. So this means that there needs to be more work that's done in the peripheries, but obviously as you collect more data, it can be clearer what some of the complexities are, even in the city center. And so this was used to inform some of the transportation planning and decision making. And then it also, once we collected the data, there were other private sector, startups that use the data to develop trip planning applications, and they want to now launch that. And we did this all with local partners, local universities, local students. So we're able to build the capacity and build this technical know-how of how to do this. Next slide, please. So this is just my last slide to say that we have an upcoming competitive mini grant that's really looking at putting public transit data to work for cities and citizens. And we're having an open call for innovations that inform planning, the creation of tools and meaningful research. And we will put up more data on our website, where we're really trying to encourage startups and innovators that are really building on transit data to improve mobility. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very interesting perspective there from Africa and the work of the WRI. And thank you everybody for your presentations this morning. There's a common theme there at the end of the importance of data across, came through in all of those presentations, I think. And thank you everybody for keeping so well to time, which gives us a chance, I think, just to have one quick question at the end. I'm just looking at some of the questions that have come in. And perhaps the question around influencing national and local governments to translate sustainable future mobility agendas into real strategies and action plans. I think the question there was aimed at ERTICO, and I'm sure Angelo will have a view on that. And perhaps there'll be a view from Geraldine in Ireland as well, because I think TII, as illustrated by the presentation, are very much at the forefront of translating into real action and strategies of sustainable mobility agenda. So how that's been achieved in an Irish context would be interesting as well. So perhaps I could just go to Angelo initially for a view on that particular question.
Yes, hi again. So I lost the question. Unfortunately, I didn't have the connection very well, the sound. Can you please repeat?
It was a question about how the importance of sustainable future mobility and the agenda is pushed at a local and national government level, and how that's translated into real strategies and action plans.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, I tried to give also a short answer at the chat, but maybe we can say a few things also here. This is maybe the biggest challenge that we are facing right now. In Europe specifically, what we try to do is we try to connect the different member states, the different countries that are participating in Europe, and we are trying to work on a number of levels. For example, policy and regulations. How can we achieve similar regulations and policies that could allow investments and implementation of these concepts on a European level? This is one side. Then we try a lot to create some common activities, piloting activities to be financed also by the European Commission, but also from governments in order to create some real-life implementations, pilots as we call them, in order to test and see in a cross-border way across different countries how this can be implemented. And also on the level of ERTICO, we have this public authority forum, as we call it, where we try to bring together different public authorities and to discuss best practices, lessons learned, and new activities or new challenges that we really need to address. So it's an issue of at the end of the day, it's an issue of policies and regulations. It's an issue of testing and evaluation of concepts, and it's an issue of financing. These are the three major elements that we try to push all together in order to be able to implement some of these things. At the end of the day, it's also a market issue. We have seen in the past, and we see it also now coming with electromobility, for example, that some things are just driven by the market. So we expect a number of these more mature concepts to be implemented. Of course, as long as the regulatory framework is there, which is not the case for automation, for example, which still needs some political interventions, let me put it this way.
Thank you. And Geraldine, there's a view from Ireland and the successes of moving some of these agendas forward in the Irish context.
Yep, thank you, Anthony. Yeah, you know, certainly I think there's probably two key parameters that on any of these agendas that we need to get right. The first is political acceptance and the second is public acceptance. And I know that Angelos certainly mentioned that in his presentation as well, is that whole need to have stakeholder engagement. But on the political acceptance piece, you know, I suppose we have been fortunate in Ireland in that the Bruce project itself has actually been put on the Climate Action Plan agenda. So we have a Climate Action Plan, which is actually due to be published next week. And road user charging, I suppose as a means of demand management and as a means of reducing carbon footprint has been put front and centre in that Climate Action Plan. So it very much kind of gives TII, I guess, leverage and a mandate to move forward. You know, so really that political acceptance is key. The other key parameter, I think, for us is to have that continuous engagement. I suppose with our ministers, and that's something that we have continued to do. I mean, we have publicized, or sorry, we haven't publicized, but we've circulated the strategic assessment report to our Department of Transport, because we very much see that, you know, we need them on board in order to be able to progress this. And certainly engagement with them to date has been extremely positive. You know, key for us and key for them is to ensure that no matter what we do aligns with policy. And we can see that through kind of, you know, Angelos and, you know, a lot of the presentations that, you know, there's so much policy alignment out there at the moment, you know, and that it's key for TII that we align with that policy, be it the European Green Deal, be it with DG Move, and that embedding that within our approach really helps move the whole agenda forward. So it's political and it's public acceptance and it's engagement.
Great, thank you. And thanks again to everybody for their contribution to this session and their presentations. I think it's been an excellent session. Conscious of the time, and I think Susanna's got a couple of important announcements to close the conference with. So if I could hand over to Susanna at that point. Thanks again, everybody.